Come with me for day 2 and last day of feeding my friends horses, chickens, and goats. I was scooping their feed here, and this is my last day doing it. I only had to do it for 2 days. Somebody else is taking over for the next week until they get back, so I was just scooping the horses' feed here. After scooping the feed, I took the buckets outside, I turned off the shed light there, and I brought the black and gray bucket over to the hose here, but I only have to fill the black bucket with water. I fill it to just a little over to where I can see the water starting to come through the grain, and I only fill it because this horse that gets this feed, he's older and can't really chew things as easily, so making his feed more into like a mush helps him chew things better, and it helps him also digest it a bit better too. So after I'm done filling the bucket a bit, I put the black bucket over by Joker's paddock, and Joker is the horse who gets his feed soaked. He is an older horse. Again, that's why he gets his feed soaked. It's just easier for him to chew and stuff. So I end up putting his bucket down by his paddock here just to let that soak up in the grain a bit more. And then I walk the gray bucket over to Vegas's paddock because Vegas does not need his grain soaked. He's not as old as Joker. He's a lot younger and he can easily chew his food, so I just easily dump that grain into his feed bucket. But he decided to push his feed bucket over a bit today, so I had to open the gate and pour it in today. After I dump Vegas's bucket, I walk back over to Joker's bucket, which is sitting by his paddock here, and I probably should have brought it over to his bucket that's on the fence, but I dropped it a little earlier. So I walked back over, dropped the gray bucket down there, and then grabbed the black bucket and brought it over to his bucket here on the fence, which he keeps knocking off of the fence. But I think I have a little theory. I think Vegas comes in afterwards and tries to see if there's any grain left, and then he's the one who knocks the bucket off, because I have yet to see Joker actually knock the bucket off himself, but I've seen Vegas do it once or twice. So I dumped Joker's food in his bucket, and you could see here he was trying to eat it while I was dumping it, and it is later at night now. I already did their feed routine at night and stuff, and he was trying to get his head like under the grain for some reason, so it was like getting on his face and stuff, so I had to like get it off his face and get it back into the bucket. He's such a silly horse. Afterwards, I walk the buckets back over to the shed and put them in the shed just so that they're out of the way and I don't have to worry about them anymore. Now I put this in a little bit of a time lapse to go a little faster, because all I was doing was walking back and forth and back and forth. So I walk back over here to the horses and I go in Joker's paddock, and I have to shut this middle gate here because Vegas and Joker get very different amounts of feed and very different feed, so they don't want any Joker getting Vegas's food, Vegas getting Joker's food, any of that. So we shut this middle gate here so that they're very separate. Then I walk out of his paddock, I walk over to Vegas's paddock, I open up his, and I check on the waters because I had to figure out how to dump this today, and that was a whole nother story in itself. That was a lot. As you can see here, I tried picking up this huge container here and trying to get all the water and grass out. I eventually did what I needed to do, but it was a whole process in itself, and that took a long time, and I probably could have just drained it, but I had to be difficult and do it the difficult way. So I actually cut this clip because I took way too long to do this, and it was just getting too long, and my phone was actually starting to get really hot for some reason, so I stopped it. Now I put it back into another time-lapse quick mode thing again because I had to go over and check on the goat waters and chicken waters, and chickens are still in their coops, goats were both in their shed, so I figured this was probably the best time to check on their waters when I don't have to manhandle 2 goats and way too many chickens to count. So I dumped all the chicken waters out and then brought the hose in the coop and refilled all the waters. This took a long time in itself. This was a whole nother process. I didn't realize how long it took until probably about after I was done with the goat water, almost. Actually, it was a little earlier than that because I filled the goat bucket, but just before I filled the goat buckets. So I was done with all of this, and then I realized that the hose wasn't even on, so that was all just water that was still just trapped in the hose. That's why it was taking so long. So that was a whole nother story. Next, I went back in the shed and I scooped the chicken scratch and chicken grain and got the goat food. I had to walk over to the horses real quick because their water was starting to overflow, was about to, so I walked over there and turned off the hose and then came back and put the chicken scratch on the ground, and the grain for the goats started spilling, so that was amazing. It was everything I needed. I shook that up to mix it up a bit and then started just, as you can see here, I put my hand in the bucket and just spread it all over the place just so they could get a variety and like a mix. After that, I went over to this first chicken coop here and let all the chickens out. As you can see, they were very excited for all their food. Then I came over to the bigger coop and I let the few chickens out that were over here. There was one black hen in here who did not want to come out, and I don't know what she was doing, but she ended up going in the next nesting box, and I don't know what she was really doing, but I kind of just left her because I didn't want to bother her or anything. If she wanted to come out on her own time, she can. If not, then she didn't have to. So kind of just let her do her own thing there. Then I came over and checked on the goat waters, pulled the hose back, and then got the goat grain. As you can see, it ended up spilling there. So now I walked over to the hay shed and grabbed a flake of hay, and I realized I went in the wrong shed here, so I walked over to this one and got a flake of hay for the goats so that I could spread it out. Then I sprinkled the goat food on the stump there because that's what they like to eat it off of, and I got the hay and I just kept tearing it apart, sprinkling it around the stump because that's where they typically like to eat at. So I just sprinkled all the hay and grain around this area. And I ended up dropping a pretty big chunk there, so I ended up going back and just pulling it apart again, spreading it around the area. I came back over into the chicken area here because I forgot the pink bucket in there, and I did not want anybody trying to trap themselves in it or underneath of the bucket. So I grabbed that and I brought that back out before letting the goats out. And you have to unlock the top one first, or else when they jump on the door, you can get smacked in the face. Has yet to happen to me, but I know it's happened to somebody else. So, yeah. Then the goats ran over to their food. They started eating. And they actually started going after the hay today, which I have not seen them do yet. And I heard they didn't like the hay outside as much. They do have hay in their shed that they were going at yesterday. But I've yet to see them eat hay outside, and today they seem to go for it, so they're very friendly goats. You can see here they started going for the hay outside, which I was very surprised about because they actually were not eating the past 2 days any of the hay outside. They would go in their shed and eat the hay. Then I brought the scooper and the pink bucket back into the shed because I didn't need it anymore and the feeding part was done. And I had to turn off the water, which I came back, being now it is the evening. I already did the nighttime feed routine. I came back today and somehow the water was still on. The hose was still full, I guess. The water just doesn't go through the hose all the way unless it drains through the hose. I have no clue. But the water was off, so that's the most important part. There was no water still going through the hose other than what was just left in there from earlier. Then I ended up bringing the hose back and just kind of putting it into a nice little area over here so that it wasn't all scattered around. After I was done in the goat and chicken area, I went back over to the horses and saw that both Vegas and Joker were away from their buckets, giving me a hint that either they were done or they just didn't want any more food. So I know Vegas was definitely done because he eats all of his food. Joker has been eating all of his food lately. I haven't had a problem with him eating any of his food the past 2 days, but I know sometimes he has a smaller appetite and doesn't want to eat as much on certain days. But I have not had that issue with him the past few days, so that's been good. I came back over though and unlocked this middle gate here because they need a bigger roaming space, and typically they'll just end up swapping paddocks. Joker will come in and get some water from Vegas's paddock, and Vegas will come into Joker's paddock and see whatever food is left to eat. Then I just lock up the gate here. I hook it to the lead rope that's on the fence and the chain that hooks onto the gate. I just lock up onto the gate there. This one right here, this is Joker. He's just coming in for some water. He started playing with the water for a bit yesterday too. Then I left both paddocks. I locked up, and before I locked up, I actually saw I don't even know what this is. A lizard, gecko, something like that, but it was really tiny, and it was just standing there for a really long time, or laying there, I guess. I didn't see it when I came back later, so it left and did something. Afterwards, I locked up for the morning and came back later to feed the horses and ride Vegas one last time.